I still remember the exact sound of the water running in the sink that evening. Steady, familiar, the kind of sound you stop noticing after living in the same house for decades. I had just finished washing my hands when I heard my daughter's voice come through her phone, sharp and careless, because she'd forgotten to turn off the speaker. "He's not clear-headed anymore. Next week get him into a nursing home." That wasn't the part that hurt the most. What hurt was the pause after it. The pause where my daughter Emily could have said no, could have defended me, could have remembered who I was. Instead, she answered calmly like she was reading a grocery list. "The house will sell for at least 800 grand, Ryan. It's time we lived for ourselves." I stood there at the sink, 72 years old, my hands wrinkled, still wet, trembling just a little. Not from fear, from realization. In one careless minute, they hadn't just planned my future. They'd erased my past. The kitchen was quiet except for their voices floating through the phone. This same kitchen where my wife, Elena, used to laugh while burning pancakes on Sunday mornings. The sunset stretched across the wall and landed right on her framed photo, like it was saying goodbye all over again. I didn't interrupt them. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't slam anything down. I just listened. Ryan talked about paperwork. Emily talked about what's best. They talked about my house like it was already gone. Like I was already gone. I ended the call quietly and dried my hands. "Hello, buddies. My name is Harold Whitman. I'm 72 years old, and I live just outside Raleigh, North Carolina, in a 2-story wooden house I built with my own hands over 25 years ago. I spent my life as a county building inspector. I was paid to notice cracks, weak foundations, things that looked fine until you leaned on them. Funny thing is, I never thought I'd have to inspect my own family. This house isn't just lumber and nails. Every board has a memory. Every room carries a season of my life. I carried Emily down these stairs when she had a fever. I sanded these floors at midnight while Elena slept on the couch, pregnant, exhausted, and smiling anyway. And now I was a burden. I walked over to the small safe hidden behind the dining cabinet. Same one Elena and I installed after our first break-in scare years ago. Inside were the deeds, the tax records, the will, neatly stacked, organized, still in my name, every single page. I sat at the table and opened Elena's old notebook. Her handwriting was soft but firm. On the last page she'd written, years ago, "If I'm gone one day, don't let kindness become the rope around your neck." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Outside, the evening light hit the roof I repainted myself last spring. I remembered every nail, every repair, every inspection I'd passed and failed in my life. I'd spent decades protecting buildings from collapse. Maybe it was time I protected myself. I didn't feel anger. That surprised me. What I felt was clarity. If you've ever given your whole life to your family and suddenly realized they'd already planned what to do with you, you know that feeling. That quiet drop in the chest. That moment where something inside you wakes up. And if this part already feels familiar to you, take a second and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. A small town, a big city, maybe a house full of memories just like mine. I read every single one. That night I checked the locks like I always do. Old habit, inspector habit, click by click, everything still secure, still mine. I poured a cup of tea and sat alone at the table, the clock ticking steady on the wall. No shouting, no confrontation, just a simple truth settling in. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. They were about to learn the difference between quiet and powerless. Tomorrow, I would take the first step, not out of revenge, not out of spite, but to protect the one thing Elena and I built together, dignity. And if this story already has you leaning in, do me a favor. Tap the like button so it reaches someone else who might need to hear it. And if you want to stay with me through what comes next, subscribe. An old man's got a long walk ahead, and I'd appreciate the company. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind wouldn't slow down. Every tick of the clock felt louder than usual, like the house itself was listening. I got up before sunrise, the way I always did when something important needed thinking through. The air in the house was cool, quiet, honest. I brewed coffee and sat at the dining table, the same table Alina insisted we keep even when styles changed. Solid things don't need trends, she used to say. I started opening drawers. Not rummaging, sorting. Tuition receipts first. 4 full years for Emily. I remembered every check I wrote, every overtime inspection I took so she wouldn't graduate with debt. Then the wedding expenses. I'd argued gently about keeping it small. She cried. I caved, a father always does. Then the loan guarantee. Ryan's name, his signature sloppy, mine careful. He promised it was temporary. I believed him because belief was cheaper than doubt. I lined the papers neatly, not with anger but with understanding. This wasn't betrayal that happened overnight. It was something that grew slowly, fed by my silence and their comfort. I walked through the house after that, the living room where Emily took her first steps, wobbling toward Alina's open arms. The hallway where I patched drywall after she slammed her bedroom door as a teenager. The backyard where I taught her how to ride a bike, letting go before she knew I had. I stopped in the bedroom and looked at Alina's side of the bed. Empty, but not gone. Her presence was still there, steady, like she was watching to see what I'd do next. I sat on the edge of the bed and said out loud, "I won't argue." That sentence surprised me. It felt final, clean. Arguing would only give them what they wanted, a chance to paint me as confused, emotional, unstable. I'd spent a lifetime learning that the loudest person in the room usually has the weakest position. I opened my old leather notebook, the one I carried back when I inspected commercial sites. On a blank page I wrote one line, "Don't explain, don't beg, act correctly." I underlined it twice. By mid-morning I made a call. Not to Emily, not to Ryan, to Nina Rodriguez, the attorney who helped Alina and me update our will years ago. Her voice was calm, professional, familiar. "Mr. Whitman, it's good to hear from you." "I need an appointment," I said. "Tomorrow morning, it's about the house." She didn't ask questions, she didn't need to. 9 a.m. works. I hung up and felt something shift inside me. Not relief, control. The rest of the day I played my role. Answered Emily's evening call like nothing had changed. Asked about her trip. Told her I'd eaten. She sounded distracted. Rushed. Guilty, maybe. Or maybe just busy planning a life that didn't include me. After the call, I stood at the window and watched the sun dip behind the trees. The house glowed warm, the way it always did at that hour. A man doesn't realize how much he loves a place until someone treats it like a price tag. I checked the locks again before bed. Front door, back door, windows, everything solid, still standing. Lying in the dark, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not sadness, not rage, readiness. They thought I was slipping because I'd gone quiet. What they didn't understand was that quiet is where plans are made. Tomorrow, I'd walk into Nina's office, and once that happened, there would be no turning back. Sometimes the strongest move a man can make is the one no one sees coming. The next morning, I put on the gray jacket Alina liked. The one she said made me look less like a man inspecting a crack and more like a man who already fixed it. I smiled at that thought as I locked the door behind me. Nina Rodriguez's office sat in a brick building downtown, quiet, clean, the kind of place where nothing was rushed and nothing was sloppy. I arrived 10 minutes early. Old habit. Being late always meant something was already wrong. Nina greeted me with a firm handshake and eyes that missed nothing. "You look calm," she said as we sat down. "I am," I answered. "That's why I'm here." I told her everything: the call, the nursing home, the plan to sell the house while I was still breathing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't dramatize it. I just laid out facts the same way I used to when I found structural violations on a job site. When I finished, Nina leaned back and folded her hands. "Let me be very clear, Harold," she said. "You are the sole owner of that house. No one can sell it. No one can place you anywhere. And no one can touch your assets without your consent while you're mentally competent." I nodded once. I'd expected that answer, but hearing it still felt like air returning to my lungs. "They can pressure you emotionally," she continued, "but legally they have nothing." For a moment, I thought of Emily as a little girl hiding behind my leg when strangers came to the door. How strange it is when children grow up and start using the same tactics they once feared. "I don't want to fight," I told Nina. "I don't want revenge." She met my eyes. "Then you're already doing this the right way." We talked options: quiet ones, clean ones, ways to move forward without giving anyone room to twist the story. Nina suggested something that sounded drastic at first, but the more she explained, the more it felt logical. A controlled sale, no public signs, no noise, cash buyers, short timeline, full legal protection, and most important of all, everything handled through her office. "You don't need to confront them," she said. "You don't need to explain. You just need to act." That sentence settled deep in my chest. She slid a document across the table. Limited authorization. Narrow. Temporary. Enough for her to handle the process without anyone ever putting papers in my face or catching me off guard. I read every line, twice. Then I signed. The pen felt heavier than it should have, but when the ink dried, something inside me steadied. I wasn't losing anything. I was choosing. "One more thing," Nina added. "I recommend you open a new bank account once this is done. Separate, secure, no shared access, no assumptions." I nodded. "I've inspected buildings for 30 years, I said. "This time I'm inspecting exits." She smiled faintly. "Most people wait too long to do that." When I walked out of her office, the city looked the same. Cars moved, people hurried. No one knew anything had changed, but everything had. Back home, I sat at the table and opened Alina's notebook again. I didn't need to read it this time. I already knew what she'd say. That evening, Emily called. Same routine, same tone, asked if I'd eaten. Told me not to forget my pills. I answered gently. Let her believe nothing had shifted. After the call, I looked around the house one more time. Not with sadness, with focus, like a man measuring a space before renovation. They thought my silence meant confusion. They had no idea it meant preparation. And if you're still listening right now, still following this slow, quiet turn of events, you already understand something important. Strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just moves carefully and locks the door behind it. Tomorrow, the next step would begin. And once it did, there would be no room left for anyone else to decide my life for me. The next few days moved quietly, but with purpose. I didn't rush. Rushing leads to mistakes, and I'd spent my whole career fixing other people's rushed decisions. A man named Victor Lane came by first. Real estate evaluator. Mid-40s, clean shoes, quick eyes. The kind of man who measures twice without saying a word. I walked him through the house myself. I showed him the oak floors I laid plank by plank, the roof I redid after the hailstorm, the wiring I upgraded long before the city required it. He tapped here and there, nodded, made notes on his tablet. "You've taken care of this place," he said finally. "Most homes this age hide problems. This one doesn't," I smiled just a little. That's because it was never just a house. He left with a firm handshake. 2 days later, Nina called. We have a buyer, she said. Cash, quiet. No signs, no listings, no delays. I closed my eyes when she said the number. Not because it shocked me, but because it confirmed what Emily already knew. They hadn't seen a home. They'd seen a prize. Proceed, I told Nina. After that I began packing, but only what mattered. Eleanor's wedding ring, the old photo albums, my toolbox, the Bible she kept by her bedside, everything else stayed, furniture, decor. Things Emily and Ryan once left behind and never came back for. I labeled their boxes neatly, not out of anger, out of clarity. Their lives would no longer spill into mine unchecked. I called a storage facility and paid 3 months in advance. No drama, no messages, just receipts and dates. Then I changed the locks. The locksmith didn't ask questions. Professionals rarely do. When the final lock clicked into place, the sound echoed through the hallway. Clear. Final. That night I stood alone in the living room. The walls felt different, like they were waiting. Not empty, ready. I wrote one sentence on a sheet of paper, folded it carefully, and placed it on the entry table. Nothing cruel, nothing loud, just truth. I turned off the lights one by one and slept better than I had in weeks. Some people think endings are loud, explosive, messy, but the most permanent ones happen quietly, when the decision has already been made and there's no need to explain it anymore. And if you're still here with me, still walking this road, you already know what's coming next. The moment when plans made behind my back finally meet reality. Stay with me. The silence is about to speak. They came back on a Friday evening. I knew the timing without checking a clock. Some habits never fade. I was sitting in my new place when my phone buzzed softly. Motion detected. Front entry. I didn't rush. I finished my tea, then opened the screen. Emily stepped out of the car first. Same confident walk. Same tidy clothes. Ryan followed, dragging suitcases, already irritated by the rain. They didn't look like people coming home. They looked like people stopping by to collect something that belonged to them. Emily pulled out her key. She tried once, then again. Her shoulders stiffened. Ryan took the keys from her hand and forced the lock harder, like pressure could fix entitlement. Nothing, the door didn't move. What did he do? Ryan snapped. Emily rang the bell once, twice, 3 times. Each chime echoed into an empty house that no longer answered to them. Ryan circled around back. I switched cameras calmly. I watched him test doors, windows, mutter under his breath. Finally, the front door opened from the inside. They stepped in and stopped. The envelope lay on the table exactly where I'd placed it. White, plain, impossible to miss. Emily picked it up with shaking hands and read. Her face changed slowly. Shock first, then panic, then something close to grief. Ryan leaned over her shoulder, read it once, then crumpled the paper slightly in his fist. He sold it, he said, flat, angry, disbelieving. Emily's voice broke. He can't do that, Ryan laughed, sharp and bitter. He already did, they argued, loud at first, then desperate, accusations flying back and forth. Words they'd rehearsed for me turning on each other instead. He was supposed to be confused, Ryan said. You said he was slipping, Emily shot back. You said the house was our future. I muted the sound. I didn't need to hear more. I already knew the truth. The house was never about caring for me. It was about clearing me out of the way. Emily sank into a chair, staring at the walls like they might explain themselves. Ryan paced, pulling at his hair, dialing numbers that didn't answer. For the first time, they were standing inside a plan that didn't include them. I set the phone face down. No victory, no joy, just a deep, steady calm. Consequences don't need speeches. They arrive on time and let people talk to themselves. And somewhere between their raised voices and the empty rooms, the truth finally settled in. They hadn't lost a house. They had lost control. The calls started the next morning, not angry at first, confused, then urgent. Emily left 2 voicemails. Ryan sent a message that sounded polite on the surface but carried threat underneath. Words like misunderstanding and temporary floated around as if reality could be negotiated. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat across from Nina in her office again. Same chair, same calm. She read the messages once and slid them back to me. "They're trying to pull you into a conversation they can control," she said. "We won't give them that." She explained it simply. Any communication would go through her. Any pressure, any intimidation, any claim about my mental state would be documented. Clean, legal, quiet. By afternoon, Emily finally called again. This time I answered. "Dad," she said, voice tight, already cracking. "Why didn't you tell me?" I took a breath, slow, measured. The same way I used to before delivering bad inspection news. "Because you weren't asking," I said. "You were deciding." Silence. "You sold the house without telling me," she whispered. "I protected myself without asking permission," I replied. "There's a difference." She tried to shift it, my health, my age, how worried she was. The words sounded rehearsed, like lines practiced in a mirror. I didn't argue. "I'm not angry," I said, "but I won't be managed like a problem anymore." That's when Ryan stepped into the call. I could hear him before he spoke, breathing sharp. "This isn't right," he said. "You can't just do this." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I already did." The call ended shortly after, not slammed, just done. 2 days later, Nina arranged a meeting. Neutral space, clear rules, no yelling, no demands. Just truth. Emily arrived first. She looked smaller somehow. Less certain. Ryan sat stiff beside her, arms crossed, jaw tight. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain my pain. I didn't list sacrifices. I spoke once. "I love you," I told Emily. "But love doesn't mean surrendering my dignity. I'll see you as your father, not as someone you manage." Ryan looked down. For the first time, he said nothing. Nina closed the folder gently. "This matter is settled," she said. "From here forward, boundaries are not optional." When we stood to leave, Emily's eyes were wet. She reached out, then stopped. Respect, finally learning where to stand. We didn't hug, but we didn't break either. That's the thing people don't tell you. Sometimes saving what's left of a relationship means refusing to save it the old way. As I walked out into the sunlight, I felt lighter. Not because I'd won. Because I'd finally stopped losing myself. The mornings are quieter now. I wake up without the weight in my chest, brew my coffee slowly, and sit by the window as the light settles into the room. No one rushing me. No one planning my life behind my back. Just time, steady and honest. I moved into a small place on my own terms. Nothing fancy. Clean. Calm. A balcony where I can watch the trees sway when the wind moves through them. It reminds me that even old roots can breathe easier when they're not being pulled. Some evenings I work with my hands again, fixing wood, sanding rough edges smooth. There's something healing about it. When your hands are busy, your heart catches up. Emily texted me once after everything settled. Short message. No demands, no guilt, just, "I understand more now." I didn't reply right away. Understanding takes time. And time, I've learned, is not something you rush just because you're afraid of losing it. I still think of Alina every day. I talk to her sometimes when the room is quiet. I tell her I kept my promise. I didn't let kindness turn into chains. I didn't let love erase self-respect. Forgiveness came, too. Not the kind that opens the door wide again, but the kind that lets you sleep without anger whispering in your ear. Forgiveness that keeps the door closed but the heart steady. I don't know what the future holds with my daughter. Maybe we'll rebuild something slower, cleaner, truer. Maybe not. But this much I know now, love without boundaries isn't love. It's surrender. And I'm done surrendering. If this story made you think about family, dignity, or the quiet strength it takes to stand up later in life, tell me, where are you watching from? I read every comment, and everyone feels like a hand on my shoulder reminding me I'm not alone. If this meant something to you, tap like so it reaches someone else who might need it tonight. And if you want to keep walking these roads with me, stories about life, mistakes, and finding your footing again, go ahead and subscribe. An old man still has a lot to say and a little more living left to do.